Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to see this very select group here to have a bit of a pre-show discussion about the amazing youth theatre production that's playing at the moment, Beauty and the Beast. I have with me on stage, my name's Kate Mosse, and I'm a playwright and a novelist, and have the great good fortune to do all the pre- and post-performance interviews here. What we are going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about this particular production, and then we're going to leave a little bit of time for questions from you as the audience. So what we have on this stage at the moment is Chichester royalty, basically, ladies and gentlemen. We have Dale Rooks in the middle, who is the director of the Youth Theatre, and you will know from many extraordinary productions, most recently, not least of all, Running Wild, that has been touring and playing in London, and of course is the director of Beauty and the Beast. We have the very legendary Simon Higlett, also one of the king of set designs. Most recently, you might have seen The Norman Conquest, you might have seen Singing in the Rain, you might have seen Artur Ui, but is also responsible for this extraordinary set that we're sitting on. And we have the very wonderful Colin Billing, who is absolutely Chichester royalty too, and I think not least of all 101 Dalmatians, Peter Pan, Christmas Carol, the last three or four, and as well as being the musical director of the show, also has to sit here every night playing as well. So your job is not finished, whereas Simon's job is finished.
Yes, I'm done.
Yes, he's done, so he's going home after this. Dale, starting with you, I don't think there is another theatre of this calibre in the country that hands over at Christmas its slot to a youth theatre, to the youth theatre. So it's a huge responsibility. But what is it that makes you decide to do one particular show versus another? And when you take something like Beauty and the Beast, a famous Disney show, what is it that makes you think, I know how to reinterpret that for my youth theatre and for our audience?
Well, first of all, I think I have to say that the title is very important. It's trying to find something that we know will be popular for our audiences, but also something that has the ingredients for large scale, because obviously that's the way I work. Having as many young people in a company as I possibly can. So in this particular one, there are 72. So the ingredients are, you know, good major roles, but also scope to develop really good ensemble work. And that's very important for me. So I guess it's, you know, you have to look at what the audience will want, but also what's going to be appropriate and suitable and exciting and innovative for the young people to work on.
Because something like Beauty and the Beast, and of course many of the other shows that you've done, like Peter Pan or Christmas Carol, they're beloved and well known. Mm-hmm. But this, I have to say, this production is quite extraordinary because it both is Beauty and the Beast that we know and something completely modern and different. So how much power do you give to the people writing the script, to Anna, to say, keep these bits and lose that bit or reinterpret, or is that totally up to the writer?
It's a real collaboration. So the very first meeting I had was with Anna Ledwich, the writer, and Richard Taylor, the composer. And I think the first big decision we made was it wouldn't be Disney. And we didn't want to go down that route. And it's quite funny, really, because, you know, even at the auditions, young people were coming in and saying, oh, I know all the songs for Disney. Ah, okay, great. But it wasn't something that we wanted to do because we wanted to put our own mark on something and to relive that wonderful story as it was originally, but put a different kind of take on it, which I think is really exciting. When you're doing a world premiere, sounds very grand, but when you are doing something completely new, you want to offer something different. It's not everybody's cup of tea, maybe, to come and see something that they're not expecting. But for us, I think it's really important that we take the opportunity for new writing or something that's going to be written for us to do something that is completely different. So we started with the idea that it would be a play within a play. I'm not going to give too much away because I know some people haven't seen it. And that we would set it in the 40s. So that started our thinking. And then Anna took it away, and she's done the most phenomenal job, I think, of the script, because it's truthful to the story, but it has new characters within it. So she's developed something extraordinary.
And there are hints, in a way, of Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Yes,
in terms of the period, which I think is wonderful. A final question before I bring Colin in is, you have the biggest youth theatre in the country. It is celebrated, rightly so.
Yeah.
There are many of us, not least me. You know, my son started his career because he was in this youth theatre, and there are many other young people, you know, on the stage and behind the stage for whom that is true. Is there any part of you, when you're deciding, that you look at the young people you have at that time and decide, well, I've got lots of dancers at the moment, or lots of actors at the moment, or lots of singers, or lots of, you know, very short people, or lots of very tall people? I mean, how much do you look at your youth theatre, or do you actually choose the play and then see what the young people bring to their audition?
I choose the play, and I think in that way you can offer new skills. For example, in this one there is some puppetry, which is very difficult, but I knew that there would be a couple of people who would relish learning those new skills to puppeteer. So I think, rather than say, I've got, you know, more boys this year who are talented, or whatever, more girls, it's more about choosing a title and then building the company and setting the skills for them. That's more important for me, I think.
Colin, hello again.
Hi.
Hello. You know this youth theatre very well, and you've worked with Dale. You've also worked all over the place in many drama schools. You have your own music school itself, you know, with all sorts of different sizes and shapes of stage. What are the different challenges, I suppose, or opportunities when you're working with a youth theatre, which is an ensemble? Some of them will have voices, and maybe have singing training, and others will just have great enthusiasm and are doing it for the first time. So how does that influence how you, as the music director, and how you drill them and train them and help each young person to deliver their best, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge, because the young people of this age very often get very self-conscious about their singing voices, and actually paint themselves into a corner sometimes. Sort of, you know, the number of times sort of somebody will say, "Oh, I'm an actor, I don't sing," and it's almost sort of like someone's, you know, they've been told that's the box they live in, or I'm a dancer, I don't sing. And a lot of the work we do here, or I do anywhere, is trying to find voices out of these people, and the approach is different, I think, for everybody. For me, it's the analogy I always use with them. It's like you wouldn't dream of picking up a saxophone and suddenly being able to play it, and just because your voice is part of your body, it won't just do it, and the fact that it won't just do it doesn't make you incapable of doing it. It's about learning some very simple ideas and techniques. I try not to overcomplicate things for them. It's a lot about visualizations and ideas, and very much going, you are still an actor who sings. So we approach it from the point of view of what's the text, what's the storytelling, and how does the character express themselves. You know, the emotion is so heightened they can no longer speak, they have to sing. And I think also getting them used to the fact that inside their head they can't hear how they really sound, and they need to trust the process and know how they can then build those skills. But it's a lot about confidence and a lot about the mind as much as the instrument, I think.
And do you do a lot of what I suppose those of us who are lay people would think of as choir work to start with? Everybody standing together and singing before they're on the stage, because it's so striking when you watch the production that the music's difficult, but often people are singing, moving about, they're going in and out of places. They're not all standing facing front, you with your baton.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, not as much as you might think, probably. I mean, the initial call for an ensemble number like the big finale song of this show will be everybody standing around the piano with scripts or scores, learning the notes. But very quickly we move, because akin to, you know, the professional world, I guess, there's and maybe the difference between our work and, say, school is that there'll be a music call and then we'll stage the number. There won't be practices to come together to practice how we do it. It's very much, here's the material, go away and learn it, come back, and then put it into situ. So probably they assimilate it faster than you might think. And I think actually that is one of the things, of course, with young people, is that they don't really know. I think Richard talks about this in his programme notes, that it's sort of they're slightly unaware how complex some of the material is. Whereas an older actor might look at it and go, well, this is very, very challenging. They go, oh, it's a tune, I can sort of sing it.
Colin's not going to tell you how brilliant he is, but he is. So I'm going to say it. And one of the things that he does extraordinarily well, and please listen for it this evening, are the harmonies. So, you know, once you're given a score, Colin seems to do something quite magical with it that takes us into a different realm of singing, and it's really, really very beautiful.
It's always a joy.
How much do you work, you know, this is a new score, and it isn't Be My Guest and Beauty and the Beast Disney songs. How much do you work with the composer Richard, or does he do his bit with the book writer and then hand it to you and it's your job to deliver?
I mean, each job like this is probably different. Each composer likes to work in a different sort of way. It's actually ended up being quite collaborative, this piece. Richard we started off with a score which was relatively complete by the time we did our R&D week in August. And then I think the initial conversations were about what keys we should have songs in, because Richard had written them in his ideal place in his head, and then I could sort of go...
For young people, there are different keys that suit better?
Well, there was a bit of that, and actually in terms of the songs for Beauty, because we were taking this view with Beauty that she wasn't the traditional place, that maybe she was a little more grounded, and that therefore that should be also reflected in her singing, so it should maybe come down slightly. And then we took the score, we take it into the rehearsal room, we sort of find out what works, and we throw a few ideas around, and then I would go back to Richard and go, well, how about this? We've tried this. Do you like? Do you not? And it's generally quite collaborative. Sometimes a composer will just write a score and go, get on with it. But usually, because as Dale said, you know, it's a world premiere, it's the first production of something, so there's a bit of evolving and working on it.
But it is hard music, a lot of it.
Yes.
I mean,
I think that's the brilliant thing, though, is that Richard hasn't written for young people. He's written a score for a group of adults, if you like, and it's challenged them, and that's what I love, and that's what I love about the writing, that it's not patronising. It's not, we're going to write something for a youth theatre, and therefore we'll just be careful
and
where
we
that's where you
put
always
the
level.
one always can end up in trouble if you work with children and treat them as being children and not capable of dealing with the material. That's when you can really stumble, I think, if you take the view that anything is possible and work. You know, I only have really one way of working, whether I'm working with adults or young people.
Yes.
So,
and I mean, it's as always here, an astonishing creative team that most people would give their right arm for, I think. Simon, you are a great friend to this theatre, have done many wonderful designs in both of these houses, and you have the mixture of a brilliant job and an unenviable job, which is delivering what a youth theatre with 72 young people to put on a stage needs, but you have managed to make it both gothic and scary, but a little bit fairy tale-y.
Yes, a little bit.
And that is lovely to see.
Yes.
So can you explain to everybody how the set is here, and you can all come down and see the maquette afterwards if you want to, before we finish. What does Dale say to you? Does she say, off you go, here's the script?
Kind of, yes. I think you do.
She doesn't
don't you?
say, I need this, I need four doors here. Explain a bit how you
I just
get
get
to
the
do it.
script and I read it through, and then we have an initial meeting and say, what physically do we need to do in this production before we even decide what it looks like. And I remember when I was at college watching Beauty and the Beast, or Belle and the Bête, and it was, I can't remember his name, it's tip of my tongue. Anyway, it's a very old film, 1930s, and it's in black and white. And I think I lent it to Dale and said, just look at this, and I have a tiny homage to it in my design, in that the candles are held by human arms. But you'll have to watch the film or Google it. I'll remember who it is in a minute. But so the style was tricky, really, because I don't know where it came from. I kind of just made it up, to be honest.
I think you showed me a lovely reference.
There was a little bit of Tim Burton. There was a little bit of... I was desperately trying to avoid anything Disney. I did actually go and see the film, because I thought I should, the new film. the kind of not the animated one, and then watch the animated one just so I knew not what to do. But I kind of made it up, and then it's coping with this space, which is awfully difficult when you've got this many people on stage, and it's a set that needed to move. It needed to change location. We thought I often don't on this stage, but I thought this did, so I ended up with a revolve yet again. But it's a very useful tool, and we use it sparingly, and. Yeah, so that's kind of how it evolved. And I just make a model. I don't do any drawings or anything. I just plunge straight in and make a white card model and then end up coloured in like this one. So it kind of evolves. And Dale and I have meetings along the way saying, what if it does this? What if it does that? And how do we solve this bit? And in fact, on this production, there were a few things we solved at the technical rehearsal. We left it that late because we really didn't know how to solve things until we were on stage. We kept saying, we'll do that later. We'll do that later. But so yeah, that's how I approached it.
And with a set that's as wonderful as this, but I mean, it works, the castle works in terms of going up and down. How does that change when you're in a rehearsal room? Is Simon in the room as well, actually explaining to people, well, this in fact will be a tower and there'll be a staircase here?
Not particularly, no. I think you had photographs in the rehearsal room and a plan, but it's very difficult to get an upper level in the rehearsal room unless you kind of build the set. So I think we left quite a bit of that till we got to the tech. But you kind of knew where we wanted it to move and revolve and things. We have the luxury of a little bit more time on these shows, so we could wait until we got everyone on stage. But I popped in most Sundays to see how things were doing and how it was evolving. And if things were changing, because every week I get rehearsal notes and things change or things get invented. Especially on these shows. And so I have to cope with those and do quick drawings and send those off to makers and things. So, but we get quite a long rehearsal period, don't we? Because we start in September, so which is kind of a luxury.
That's a lot longer, is it normally, than for a professional production?
Yeah, I mean, it's three evenings a week and Sundays, and then half term where we get a lot done because young people aren't in school. But I feel as though I'm always saying, I need.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, but in fact, it's quite a long time.
And Dale, with the when you have such, you put your creative team together, and obviously here, people that you've worked with a lot and you trust and you know what they mean and they know what you mean. Once the rehearsal period starts, how much does the production change from the thing you have in your mind to what is actually achievable? Does it sound different?
I think I always have quite a strong vision of a storyboard, how I like things to be, but inevitably things don't work. So you go into the rehearsal room and find what you've actually planned is not something that you can achieve. So you've got to be really flexible. I mean, I feel I'm incredibly fortunate, and so are the young people, to have such a brilliant creative and production team. And we have worked together we've tried to work it out, whether it was 6 or 7 shows.
It's a lot.
And so you really are in tune with the people that you work with, but it's so collaborative and so happy. Even the technicals feel very calm.
We try and solve each problem in the text and have a solution. So I make little bits of model and say, we could do this. And then Dale tries it and says, that doesn't work at all, or it does work, or that evolves then. So we have an idea for each thing and then see how it works with the cast. Which is great, really, because you don't often get those opportunities. The summer shows I do, they're usually decided and done, and that's it. This is much more collaborative, I think. Yeah.
And are you actually able to, in that case, be more ambitious?
Much more, yeah. I love designing these shows, sometimes more than the summer shows, because you can I take much more risks, many more risks, and things that, as Daniel said to me the other night, who would have thought of doing a wood the way you do it? Would you take that risk in the summer of doing a wood like that? There's a scene where they travel through the woods, and you kind of go, I'm not sure I would. I'd find something much more sophisticated. I mean, it doesn't actually need to be, and that's what I love doing, and it's such fun to create things with next to nothing. Whereas in the summer you think, I I need to do something very ambitious here, and I'll use some kind of technology or lift or something. But here you can use the young people.
I was just going to say that's one of the advantages. We can always solve things because we've got so many young people on board. They do. They completely help us.
So the collaboration goes all the way through the company in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but it is an enormous undertaking to have such a large company. I mean, it would be, whether it's youth theatre, you know, an opera, you know, Oberammergau, any of these things, you know, these big companies. But do you still have that moment when you come into the theatre for the tech, where, you know, you just feel so excited?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, when I first come in, and I avoided coming in on the Sunday to see the set being built, and I walked in on the Monday morning and just went, wow, oh my God. You know, from the model to the stage, it almost made me cry. It was just so beautiful. Yeah, it's a real, and for the young people as well, to see it for the first time. And I think it's the same with the sits. We go into the sits with the band, sing for the first time, and it's emotional. It's really fabulous.
Yes, it's the equivalent musically of the set coming out of the model of the instruments coming off the score, which is
because the band is a professional band.
Yeah.
It's not a youth band as well, is it?
No, it's the yes, it's. Yeah.
And a final question before I go out to questions from the audience, Dale. It is a really impressive company. There's great energy within it, some wonderful acting, wonderful voices, wonderful movement. You have many roles that are doubled. Is that to give more young people the chance of playing a lead or discovering what they're capable of? Or is that actually part of what you're allowed to do with young performers, the number of performances that they can do and things? Just explain a little bit about how casting works.
It's a little bit of both, but for me it's also a safety valve. So, for example, one of our beauties was off sick from day one, not very well, but we had the backup. If I'd put an understudy on, it would have been incredibly hard to get her up to scratch. So having two teams is always, I think, on these shows where there's a lot of sickness that goes around, you know, during the winter period, and coughing all over each other in the dressing rooms. It's really important. But the other thing is it does give more people opportunity to experience some of those major roles. So, you know, it's a little bit of both, really.
And do you see, and you as well, Colin, because you know, you've worked and do work with a lot of the leading drama schools as well, so you see students at different stages. Do you notice that there's sometimes one young person who, for the first time, thinks maybe I could do this, or I could be a lighting designer? You know, do you see that spark happening as well? I
think you do. I think and that's always, certainly for me, it's really exciting when you get vocally, when suddenly somebody realises they've got a whole new part of their talent that they really didn't realise they had. And I think, you can see the moment where people get it on these shows and suddenly move forward.
I think it's an incredibly proud moment when, you know, there are 29 new members in this company who've never performed with us before, and when you see them make that journey and become so much more confident and having so much fun. And they've done a good audition, but they're not necessarily the people that are going to be the main role standing there in the middle of the stage. They'll be part of the ensemble, but it's really important for us that it's inclusive, and it's not the same people year on year that do the shows.
And it is part of your philosophy, isn't it, that participating in whatever way in performance and creativity is about yourself. It isn't just whether you might want to be an actor or a composer or a set designer. It's about enriching everybody's experience.
Totally. And on this show, I think we have 10 technical youth theatre members. Some of them are follow spotting, some of them working backstage as assistant stage managers, some of them helping with design. It's really important that it's a global experience for lots of young people in whatever way they want to contribute. Yeah.
It's wonderful, thank you. Right, we have lurking in the Voms, Emily and Anna, They're now out of the VOMs. So we have time for a few questions before people can look at the set. Lady there, thank you very much.
How long is the process from your decision as to what show you're doing to getting to September when you're rehearsing?
I'm looking at the show for next year right now, and I have a deadline, which is probably next week. For this one, it's an incredibly short process for a new piece of work. So normally you'd have a couple of years to decide what you're going to do. Then it's written, and then you're researching and developing the process. We started in January, so I made the decision January this year. It's short, but it has worked, thank goodness.
It focuses the mind sometimes.
It does, yeah.
It's just the mind.
Yeah, so it's been a whole year of the process, really. Anna hadn't written the script. We had lots of meetings between January and March to decide what the storyboard and the framework would be, and she wrote the first draft for April. We then read it with our youth theatre members, and then one of the professional companies from the Country Girls cast, actually, read the draft 1 with us. Then we went into draft 2, read again, went into draft 3, read again, and then we did a research and development week where we put some of it on its feet with the music.
Simon.
I was getting draft scripts and thinking, how do I do that? I think you were sending me things from kind of March. So it's kind of in the back of my mind. But I actually designed it while I was doing Norman Conquest. I remember that, because I was in dressing room 12 designing it while I was doing that show.
Multitasking.
Yeah, it was.
3 plays plus another one. Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you. Another question. The question was about the number of hours of rehearsal.
So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday evenings, 3 hours each evening. Sundays, 10 till 5, half term, over 10 weeks. So I can't work that one out.
It's probably just under 200 hours, something like that, 180 hours.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, not all the company members are in every single rehearsal, so we break down the scenes and what the requirements are for the rehearsals for the young people. But it seems like a long time, but it's not really.
I think it's sort of, I worked it out once, I think it sort of equates to 4 weeks rehearsal if we were doing it full time,
yeah.
You know, on a show.
Which is about right, actually.
For a show of this scale, yeah.
But it's actually harder in a way to do smaller amounts over a longer period, because it's about keeping momentum often, isn't it? And so you have to keep making sure that stays in the room.
Well, also, young people are at school during the day, so when they come in the evening, they're quite tired. And therefore, half-term week is very, very productive. That's where we get a lot of work done. But they're incredible, the young people. They're very resilient, they're very committed. They're just wonderful.
And it's one of the things, I'm sure everybody who's seen a youth theatre, that I think is so exceptional. And when people see this youth theatre for the first time, they're surprised about that whoever you look at, they're in character. You know, there's never the one at the back who's kind of trying to wave to his granny, you know, which has been known in other youth theatres. Yeah. Another question. Has anybody got another question? Lady there, thank you very much.
Dale, the children were so good in your open-air productions in hearing them. Now, established actors find this a very difficult theatre. How about projection for these young people with their young voices? Do you find this a problem?
Yes. I mean, you have to work really hard to get them to project, and also it's about diction and articulation. Yeah. I mean, I do talk about that a lot with the young people. You know, there's no point if they're telling a story and nobody can understand it out there. And also, I remind them that the microphone doesn't do the work for them, that they have to work incredibly hard.
Yes, because particularly with younger voices, it's important that the clarity leads, because some of the younger ones don't yet have the physical support and ability to generate huge amounts of sound in a projection sense. So if it's clear and clean, then...
And it's a difficult space, this one. But I think open air, if they can project open air without microphones, then we're well on the way. But yeah, you just have to keep reminding them. And of course we note them after each performance. I've got notes for this evening, and we're way into the production now, but it's just to remind them if something hasn't come across.
And what sort of thing are those notes for?
I wouldn't dare tell you.
You don't have to ascribe them to a particular actor.
Okay, so it might be that choreographically they haven't formed quite the sequence that they need to, and we just need to remind them, or to be in the light, or that one particular section is not as energetic as it should be. So it's just those little reminders,
I think it's one of the
really.
byproducts of the fact that we do such a long run, which again is relatively unusual for a youth theatre, is one of the things that the young people aren't yet totally used to, is the idea of consistency and the fact that it sort of has to be exactly the same every night, and every night needs to feel like it's the first time they've done it, and I think that's a challenge.
It's about sustaining, isn't it? The energy.
Thank you. Gentleman in the front row, thank you.
If you get 100 volunteers, 100 youths, how many of them stay the pace? I mean, you get a lot of dropouts? Do you get people coming in afterwards?
So we had 220 audition. 78 were cast, and we lost 6. So for various reasons, maybe because some of them hadn't understood quite what the commitment would need to be, or perhaps other reasons that were out of our control. So you would expect a small dropout, I think, on a big show like this. But it's only it's not beyond the first week.
It is a huge commitment, isn't it?
Massive, yeah, it is. But for them and their parents, actually, because sometimes they have to be transported backwards and forwards. But for a family over Christmas, that's a big commitment.
But I think, you said that Colin wouldn't say how brilliant he was, and Simon wouldn't say how brilliant he was, and I'm now going to say how brilliant you are, because one of the things that is, again, exceptional about this youth theatre is that there is a sense of treating all the young people, I'm speaking now as an ex-mum of youth theatre children, as responsible professional actors who are expected to fulfil their commitments. And that starts from the age of 11 if they're in youth theatre. And consequently, when, for example, Dale's Youth Theatre was up at the National Connections and made it to the final stage and was performing at the National Theatre, it is still minuted in a National Theatre Board meeting that the behaviour of Chichester Youth Theatre was exceptional, because everybody knew how to behave backstage, nobody mucked around, everybody was respectful to the technical people as well as the famous director walking by. And that is a very unusual thing. So the dropout, you won't ever say this about yourself, but I think people know what's expected, and if they don't fulfil their obligations, they won't be part of it. And that actually means there's less dropout, maybe.
Yeah. They do sign contracts, so exactly as you would with professional production. Not quite as intense, maybe, but things like turning off mobile phones and respecting everybody within the room and the process. And I think that's really important. That they.
And I think that possibly is the note to finish on, that this is, for those of you who haven't yet seen it, it is an exceptional production. I think it's absolutely, having seen pretty much them all, I was blown away by it on Tuesday. I thought it was really extraordinary production, and everybody's done a wonderful job. And it's a great tribute to all of you and the team you put together, and we are incredibly blessed to have this youth theatre here, I think, and to have a proper Christmas show which does not involve Widow Twanky. Hurrah. But could you please give a wonderful round of applause for Simon and for Dale and for Colin.